Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the City of Casey Council meeting on the 16th of June. My name's Nolene Duff and I'm the Chair of the Panel of Administrators. Welcome to all of you that are watching live stream, and just to add a reminder that in line with the restrictions issued by the Victorian Government on public gatherings, the public gallery is not open this afternoon, but the meeting is being live streamed and we look forward to your participation as watchers. Start with the statement of acknowledgement. The City of Casey proudly acknowledges the traditional owners, Casey's Aboriginal communities and their rich culture, and pays respect to their elders past, present and future. We acknowledge Aboriginal people as Australia's first peoples and as the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we work and live. The diversity statement. The City of Casey is home to a remarkable diversity of cultures, languages, faiths, identities, landscapes and stories. From our first Australians to our most recent arrivals and every wave between, the City of Casey welcomes and represents all community members and their respective ambitions to live healthy, rewarding and happy lives. These intersecting and overlapping community stories form Casey's collective identity and contribute to its evolving rich history. We recognise this diversity as our strength and we aim to share, nurture and celebrate it. I now move to item 2 on the agenda, confirmation of minutes. We have the minutes of a council meeting held on the 9th of June 2020. Do I have a mover and seconder to confirm the minutes of the meeting?
I move those.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Seconded, Mr Boardman. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Item 3, declaration of interests. I have considered my obligations under Section 79 of the Local Government Act 1989 and declare no conflict of interest relevant to any items on the agenda this afternoon. I also note no officers have declared conflicts in the reports for today's meeting. Do my fellow administrators have any conflicts to declare?
Nothing to declare from me.
Thank you, Mr Boardman.
Nothing to declare.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. I will duly note no declaration of interest by any of the administrators this afternoon. Item 4 is public question time, and we have 5 questions today, and I'll work through each question one by one. The first question is from submitter Drew Gormley, and the question is, I am quite distressed to hear that the current appointed, not elected administrators of Casey Council have arbitrarily deemed, if my information is correct, that the opening prayer and multi-faith statement that has traditionally formed part of the council meetings have been removed. This has been done without consultation or representation, and it appears that even though the faith-based community form a significant part of the council area and have worked tirelessly to provide essential support and services, that inclusion is limited to those that hold a secular humanist perspective. It would also appear that reference to any faith-based groups and or activities have been removed from Council's website, if this is not the very essence of discrimination. I look forward to response and hopefully correction of these errors. Thank you for your question, and officers have provided a response, and I'll add to that response as well. Council values the significant contribution of faith leaders to the Casey community. The diversity statement, which you'll note I read at the outset of the meeting, at the commencement of the meeting, articulates our values around inclusion and diversity, and it does include the reference to the vital role that faith groups play in the community. Reference to faith-based groups or activities have not been removed from Council's website. I've been assured by officers that there's been no removal of that information, and I myself have had a look at the website and there are a range of references to faith-based groups on the website. Services provided by faith-based groups are also featured on Council's website as community resources during the coronavirus pandemic. Question 2 is from Graham Cann, and the question is, as a member of Casey Pastors Network and a founding member of Multi-Faith, I ask why the council has ceased opening council meetings with prayer and faith statement, and would you consider changing your decision? In response, Mr Can, the diversity statement more fully articulates council values around inclusion and diversity, which includes reference to the vital role that all faith groups play in our community. Consultation regarding council's formal recognition of diversity will form a subset of council's representative and deliberative community engagement to inform the diversity inclusion strategy over the course of the coming year. Along with other key stakeholders, council will engage directly with leaders and members of faith groups throughout the municipality to ensure the voices of Casey's diverse faith communities are heard in this consultation process. The Casey Multi-Faith Network has played a critical role in ensuring that Casey's diversity of culture and faith is acknowledged and celebrated at council meetings. The introduction of the diversity statement is intended to continue this journey, articulating that diversity is our strength. Question 3 is from Philip Kaiser, and the question is, why have all references and contact information for faith groups been removed from the City of Casey website? The response, council does not deliver religious services, yet many groups and activities are still listed that are not council managed or funded. Playgroups, Maternal and Child Healthline, 24 Hours, 13 22 29 Poisons Information Centre, 13 11 26 Children's Hospital, a further phone number, Child Protection Crisis Line, Parent Line, Australian Breastfeeding Association, Breastfeeding Counselling Service, Mum to Mum, and hundreds of other groups that I agree should be listed. This seems to be discrimination. In response, Mr Kaiser, Council's website contains a vast amount of information pertaining primarily to service Council deliver directly. For example, external health services such as Maternal and Child Healthline complements the service run by Casey staff. As Council does not deliver religious services, information on faith-based groups will vary from time to time. Currently, Council's website lists services provided by faith groups as a community resource during the coronavirus pandemic. And the website link is there, which is www.casey.vic.gov.au/community resources during coronavirus pandemic. In addition, all members of the community are able to put community events and list those, including religious groups, to share their content on the website. Further question also from Mr Philip Kaiser. Why are religious vilification statements, which many in the faith community would find offensive, allowed to remain on the City of Casey website after they have been notified of their offence? In brackets, this course is for those who believe that there is more to spirituality than religion and should come with a warning that religious sensitivities will be challenged. Spirituality transcends tribal religions, close of bracket. In response, I understand this question relates to an event listing for a program run by Casey U3A in late 2019. Event listings are populated by the community and do not necessarily reflect programs which are run by or funded by the City of Casey. As confirmed in previous correspondence to Mr Kaiser, this particular event was not funded by Council. However, website listings are monitored, and anything that met the criteria of racial and religious vilification, as defined by the Human Rights Commission, would be removed. There was another question submitted after the deadline, which was from Mr Arthur Cherry, and they related to the same topics that were covered this evening. And he raised two questions which have been responded to already. Why no prayer multi-faith statement? Does diversity not include people of faith? I think we've outlined quite clearly, and having read the diversity statement this afternoon, it does make a clear reference to faiths. And the further question from Mr Cherry was, why have all faith programs and groups been removed from the website while non-faith groups remain? And once again, we've responded to that question. There was a further question which was received from Mr Robert Ward, which actually falls out of the policy scope of this section of our local law. with respect to questions at council. However, I am going to allow this question in this instance, and the subject of the question is administrator transparency. And the question is, for transparency, could Mr Boardman provide an explanation as to his claim to have a Master of Laws degree from La Trobe University, a matter which led to his sudden resignation as CEO of the Internet Domain Organisation AUDA in July 2019. And given the particular circumstances that this is a question personally addressed to Mr Boardman, I invite Mr Boardman to provide a brief response. Mr Boardman.
Thank you very much, Chair. And in response to the question by Mr Warden, it is important that I do respond, and in the interest of transparency, I am pleased to confirm that I do hold a Master of Global Business Law from La Trobe University. And in relation to the issue that Mr Ward has raised in regards to my resignation as Chief Executive from .au Domain Administration, I would refer Mr Ward to the statement of 30 July 2019 on the .au Domain Administration website. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Mr Boardman, and I confirm that you have also shared with me the certificate documentation of your Master of Law qualification from La Trobe University. So thank you for clarifying that question from Mr Ward. That's the conclusion of the questions this afternoon, and so I now move on to officer reports. And the first item we have is item 5.1, the Casey procurement policy, and we do have a recommendation to approve the policy. Do I have a mover for that recommendation?
Yes, I move.
Mr Belmar is mover, and a seconder? Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, and if I can refer to the officer report. The proposed new policy seeks to prepare Casey to meet the requirements of the Local Government Act 2020. It will additionally enable best value service delivery to a growing community in an operating environment where the allocation of finite resources needs to be made in a way that represents best value and is transparent. And further, access across all procurement activities, Council commits to the following principles. Firstly, obtaining value for money. Secondly, promoting open and fair competition. Thirdly, advancing economic, environmental and social objectives. And finally, acting with integrity, probity and accountability. I've reviewed the policy and I commend the policy. In particular, I want to address one issue that is set out in the policy, and that is that the following elements will be given regard to in procurement decision making: economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, social sustainability. And it's the last of those that I wish to address in particular, and that is that in social sustainability that the Council is seeking to create new jobs and opportunities for people who may be struggling to find work, target cohorts that may be experiencing economic exclusion, reinvigorate depressed or marginalised communities, and improve equity of access to opportunities. And I commend the policy as one that, as all work of Council, aims towards improving the opportunities of the local community and also addresses issues of probity.
Thank you. Mr Boardman?
I've got nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to make a few comments with regard to the policy. It is an extensive and detailed policy, as you've outlined, Mr Belmar. It meets all of the requirements under legislation that we're obligated to meet, but in my view, as you've outlined, goes further in addressing some of the higher order objectives as well as achieving value for money in terms of Council's purchasing. So I'd just like to say thank you to the officers who've prepared the report. It is detailed and extensive. It makes clear the obligations that officers have in terms of their delegated authority, in terms of purchasing and financial expenditure, and I think sets quite a high standard in terms of our obligations to meet those other objectives which you outlined, Mr Belmar, including achieving a high level of integrity, probity and accountability in terms of the administration of the policy. So I too support the officer recommendation. So I'll put that recommendation to the vote. All in favour? Carried unanimously. And we have one further report this afternoon, and that's item 5.2, which is contract acceptance and sealing contract with regard to contract number CT 000637, Microsoft software licence renewal. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
I'd be pleased to move that, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. A seconder? Mr Belmar, would you like to speak to the recommendation?
Some very quick comments, Chair, following the most recent discussion around the procurement policy, and it's without any great coincidence that we are now dealing with an item of procurement, but this particular item does not fall under the policy that we have just passed. It is something that was coordinated through the Municipal Association of Victoria procurement, including a number of representatives from Manningham, Cardinia, the City of Melbourne, Northern Grampians, and 2 representatives from MOV procurement themselves. It's not exactly a large field of vendors that you could potentially look for enterprise solutions that relate to Microsoft platforms, but I am absolutely confident that a very robust and rigorous process has been undertaken, one that represents all of the values that Mr Belmar spoke around, about value for money, about ensuring that there's adequate community participation and that we are getting a decent service that is in the best strategic interest of the council's operations. And with that, because this is a contract which is above the delegations of the executive leadership team here at Casey, I'm pleased and satisfied that the process has been rigorous and that we accept, and I move that we accept the contract.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar, would you like to speak to the motion?
I have really nothing more that I can usefully add other than, as Mr Boardman has pointed out, there's been a rigorous process and it's appropriate that we move this motion.
Thank you. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried unanimously. That's the conclusion of officer reports. A brief agenda this afternoon. We have a few more items, and the first of those is item 6, the consideration of reports of committees, which is simply to note the record of Assembly of Councillors as listed in the agenda papers. Item 7, we do have a petition. We have one petition with 16 signatures. It's regarding bushfire threat in Gladesville Close, Listerfield South. The head petitioner is Mr A. Hicks. And we do have a recommendation that the City Presentation Department write to the head signatory and provide a response to the matters raised in the petition. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that recommendation?
I'm pleased to move that.
Mr Boardman moved.
I second that.
Seconded, Mr Belmar. All in favour? Recommendation is carried. Item 8 is urgent business, and there is no urgent business listed for this afternoon's meeting. So, very, very brief meeting this afternoon. Item 9, I declare the meeting closed, and thank you to those of you who have joined us in the live stream. Thank you very much. Good afternoon.